with your friend, advocate, and host, Alvaro.
Hello and welcome to LVB SHOW. My name is Alvaro and I'm very happy to be with you tonight. Okay, so before I introduce our guest, I want to say thank you so much to people listening from the United States, from Mexico, from Canada, from Latin America, from Europe. We have listeners in Asia, in Africa, and everywhere else where they are listening to the show right now. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about Apple products. Everybody knows I love Apple because it's great for my needs, and it's not another reason that I have for that. It's just that they are great for people with a visual impairment. And our guest tonight is John Panarese. He has been with us in the past. He's the founder of macfortheblind.com. And so, John, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure, John. And well, let's get to it. We want to know your opinion about this last release of new iPhones and iOS 13. Can you start by saying what did you like about the event?
I like the simple fact that Apple keeps pushing things further, you know. They keep coming out with new products. There's going to be something in October with additional products. They're talking about new iPads and a new MacBook, Pro model. So, I always look forward to the keynotes and I look forward to hearing about what Apple is up to and what they're going to be doing. And this happens to be a year in which I actually have gotten a lot of the new products. So, for example, I have an iPhone 11 Pro.
You do?
So I also have the watch, the Series 5 Apple Watch. So this is one of the rare years where I've actually gotten a couple of the new products. And I'm going to be getting a new iPad because my iPad is an original iPad Air model that doesn't support iOS 13. So I have to get an iPad that actually supports the new iPad OS so I can actually play with it. It's kind of frustrating that my iPad can't go beyond 12.4.2. So, that's where I am with products wise. I mean, I have a MacBook Pro from last year. I bought one of the new Mac Minis that came out recently. It was like the upgraded Mac Mini with the T2 chip. I got that back in July. So this is one of the rare years where I've gotten a lot of new Apple goodies right around the time they release a lot of this stuff.
Very interesting, John. And I want to ask you about the iPhone 11 Pro. What can you tell us? What is your first experience about?
Well, it's faster. It runs, it's really snappy. Obviously, they optimize it for iOS 13, so everything is going to run really well. From an accessibility standpoint, other than the fact that it's using the Bionic, the A13 Bionic chip, this is what I say to people. If you're looking to update or upgrade your phone from, let's say, an iPhone 6S, a 7, or even an 8 model, you'll notice a significant difference in the performance of the iPhone. Visually, my girlfriend loves the iPhone 11 Pro because it's got the 3-lens camera. Sighted people love their photos, their pictures. So, that's like all I've been hearing about is how wonderful the camera is. But, from the voiceover perspective, really the software is the big thing. So it really doesn't matter which device you have as long as you're running iOS 13. There are some new accessibility features. I know sometimes like the bugs in new software tend to get the top billing as far as like what people talk about. And that's understandable. And I'm not going to say that there aren't bugs in iOS 13. There aren't bugs in macOS Catalina because there are. But for me, the new features is always what gets me, the most interested in this stuff. And, so for me, I went from an iPhone XS to the iPhone 11 Pro because I have that iPhone a year program I belong to with Apple, where you can get a new phone every year if you choose to do so. So I can't say I notice a significant difference between the two phones, but I can tell you from like using a couple of clients that I have, I get to handle an iPhone 8, an iPhone 7. So I do notice a big difference when you compare to, devices like that as far as like performance and what you can expect out of the phone.
Now, John, does it fit the pocket of your shirt?
Yeah, it's the same size as the XS and the 10. I didn't get the Max. I don't need one that big. I mean, it's going to do me no good as a blind person. I understand people do get the Max. I have low vision clients who've gotten the 8 Plus and the 10, the 10 Max, 10S Max and stuff. So I get it. There are certain advantages if you do have some vision of having the larger phone screen. But for me, as a blind person with light perception only, I didn't need anything that big. So I just got the 11 Pro, and it's the same. It's the same form factor as my 10S. I just had to get a different case because, like I said, it's got the triple lens for the camera. So the old case that I had wasn't going to accommodate, the camera, which would have driven my girlfriend crazy.
Good point. And what can you tell us about the sound quality of new iPhones after the 6 Plus model? What did you see as difference?
They've gotten a lot better, particularly because they have the stereo speakers now. The 11 Pro, the sound is pretty incredible for a small device, a portable device its size. It's got some pretty powerful sound quality to it. Sometimes I inadvertently turn the ringer volume like really up to close to maximum. And it literally scares the daylights out of me sometimes if I'm just sitting here in the office and there's no noise and it just goes off and I literally jump out of my skin. And I've listened to music and I've just to test its limits and it really has some pretty incredible sound quality.
Now, John, let's talk about the battery life. Let me give you an example for our listeners. My 6 Plus, I have had it for about 4 to 5 years, and the battery is really not giving me too much power for about 4 or 5 hours, and I need to charge it again. What's the difference, you think, John, between the 6 Plus and the XR or the, what you call it, the 10X, the 10R or the 10,
10S. Yeah, I know. It gets confusing with all the letters and model numbers.
Well, I have to say for our listeners, I do get confused with those. The 10R or the 11 Pro or the 11 Pro Max, what's the real difference, do you think, between the 6 Plus and those phones?
You're going to get a lot more battery life in general out of the newer phones. I don't know about the 11 Pro Max because I don't have it, but that's supposed to have incredible battery life. I can tell you that the Pro, I get about a day and a half to 2 days of battery life, depending on how much I use the phone. So if I'm doing a lot of streaming, if I'm doing a lot of telephone calls, I'll get maybe a day and a half out of it. If it's a light couple of days, I can get pretty much 2 days out of it. So, back in the days of my, I can remember the 6S and the 7 and that, it definitely has better battery life. I think iOS 13, they still haven't gotten all of the kinks out of it as far as battery life goes, because I know before I got rid of my 10S and before I went up to iOS 13, I was getting some really significant battery life out of my 10S. Pretty much comparable to what I'm getting out of the 11 Pro. So, I always take the battery information that Apple announces at these things with a grain of salt. And I don't mean that in an insulting way to Apple, but it does, the expression your mileage will vary, based on your usage patterns and what you actually use the device for. But you'll definitely get more than a full day of charge on an 11 Pro or 11 Pro Max.
And John, if you could say what's the biggest difference between buying the 10R and the 11 or the 11 Pro, what's the biggest difference?
I think it's really just the design of the phone. The 10R was really designed as more of an economy model. My brother has one and he loves it. I think really when you're talking about the 11 Pro, you're just talking about the construction of the phone itself. The chip is obviously better. It's their latest processor chip. Apple makes their own processor chips, and not to stray off course here, but the rumor is that eventually the Mac computers are going to start using the Apple chips, and they're going to move away from Intel at some point. But that's really the biggest difference. And I guess the 10R doesn't have maybe the same camera configuration or the quality of filming that you get with the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max.
Oh, that's a good point. Now, I have heard a lot of complaining about iOS 13 because of the bugs and everything, which I understand. But, everything takes time in life, and nothing in life is perfect. So
No.
we have to be patient because Apple is making an effort always to make their products accessible for all, and we have to say they are doing well. Obviously, we wish everything would work great at the start of the release, but the reality is with any product at the beginning, there are things they need to improve.
Right.
So,
well, 0.0s are always going to be buggy. We've been blessed that iOS 10, iOS 11, iOS 12 got off to a relatively smooth start when it came to bugs. There were bugs, but 13 kind of harkens back a little bit to maybe iOS 9. It's not a complete disaster like I think it was 7 or 8 was when it first came out by any stretch. And I think, again, as I said earlier, when we first got started, people tend to blow bugs out of proportion. It's like the old telephone line game. By the time it reaches somebody, you don't know how much that story's changed from actually where it started. And I think sometimes people take some of the bugs and blow them so far out of proportion, it starts to scare everybody into, oh, I can't update. Oh, I can't update. And I've seen that on my Mac for the Blind user list where I've had a couple of people like vehemently telling the rest of the list, don't upgrade to 13, don't upgrade to... And I'm like, well, no, don't be saying that to people. Let people make their choice. Appleviz.com has a running count of all the existing bugs. If, my advice to you is look at the list. If any of those bugs kind of make you say, okay, this might be a problem for me, then wait till 13.2 comes out. But if you're like me and you just say, okay, I know they're there, I acknowledge them, go for it. There's nothing show-stopping about any of the bugs in iOS 13 or macOS Catalina that I could, in good conscience, say to people, no, don't update. I'm telling my clients, make an educated choice. If you're okay with what you read, then upgrade. If you're not okay with what you read, then just wait. It's not going to kill you either way, but don't make a big, make a mountain out of a molehill. I really don't like when people do that with this. With this stuff is when people just exaggerate and go way beyond, they hear somebody who said something about something, and by the time it gets to them, the story is so distorted, there's only a grain of real truth from the beginning,
I do agree with you, John. Absolutely. And John, for our listeners, I have a comment for people, and is that only the iPhone 6S and beyond, they are able to upgrade to iOS 13. I'm not able to do that. Yes. Right.
And Apple has a list of minimum requirements, whether you're using an iPad for iPad OS Whether you're using a Mac and you're upgrading to Catalina, I believe pretty much the 2011 or 2012 is like the line where you're really not going to be able to upgrade to Catalina. So, just make sure your device can handle the updates. I mean, with Apple, it'll tell you right off the bat. If you try to upgrade, It'll tell you this device is not capable of upgrading. So it's not like you'll start the upgrade and it will quit. It'll tell you before you even get to that point if you can do it or not.
Now, John, I wonder, although I don't have this question here, now it comes to my mind, and it's about the AirPods. Do you like those headphones? Do you have them?
I have the original ones, not the second version that came out. I have the actual ones that go back to the first release. It was a Christmas present from my girlfriend, and I love them. The battery life, I warn you, and people who probably have had the AirPods for a while, most of these Bluetooth devices, unfortunately, battery life tends to start to degrade as you use them more and more. But I've always loved my AirPods. And the thing I really love about them is I'm a guy who wires drive me nuts. And the one thing that's always bothered me about wired headphones and wired earbuds is the wire, because it's there. It's always in my face. It's always, touching me. So I love the fact that I can walk around with just the earbuds in my ears, and that's it. And I'm using them right now. And, it's great. It's fantastic in that, but, the thing you got to be careful with is, music and telephone calls and stuff, at least on the original ones, is only going to give you about 4 or 5 hours of battery life. And there's a lot of rumors that by Christmas, Apple's going to come out with a third generation that's supposed to be noise canceling. There's a lot of references in iOS 13 software to noise canceling earbuds. I should say AirPods. So we'll see. Obviously, rumor is rumor. You take it for what it's worth, but that's what seems to be indicating.
Now, on your iPhone 11 Pro, you have a dual SIM, right?
Yes.
Do you like it?
I haven't really needed to use it because I'm an AT&T customer, so I just updated it and just did everything from my iCloud my iCloud backup. I didn't have to touch the SIM, so.
And have you used 2 phone numbers on the same device?
No, I only have 1 phone number.
But you can have 2, right?
Yes. That's my understanding.
Okay, now, I have researched a lot about iOS 13. In my view, but I want your opinion, it seems to me, reading the features, that this may be the most powerful iOS update for us, maybe ever, because it has this customization of voiceover gestures. It has voice control that is going to work with voiceover properly very soon, hopefully. I know it does work today, but I don't know at which level it does.
It's okay. It's got some issues with voiceover, but it works. I've played with it. I've done some demonstrations for clients. The customization of gestures is awesome. But not to interrupt you, please finish what you were saying.
Oh, yeah. Besides that, those 2 things, the fact that Apple has realized how important is accessibility, putting accessibility in the first menu of the settings instead of being more hidden, so to speak, right?
Yes.
I think it's important for us as a community. And it has many other things. I mean, to be honest with you, it has so many things. When I went through it was unbelievable. But I want your opinion. Do you think it's one of the most powerful ones? Obviously, when most bugs are gone.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you know what it is? They're porting stuff over. If you're a Mac user, a lot of the voiceover features that we enjoy on the Mac are starting to show up, in iOS 13. And I think customization of the gestures, the activities setting, and even voice control. And I'm very careful about voice control. And again, this is John's opinion. You can take it for what it's worth. I think what happens sometimes with blind people is they hear, oh, voice control. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I don't have to do anything with my phone. I can do everything by voice. And I think that's a bit of a cop out. I think that sometimes blind people are really too timid. And, they take the device like an iPhone or an iPad that has no tactile, there's no really buttons, especially with the newer iPhones that don't have a home button. And it's like, well, I can't use that because I'm blind. And you don't take what I tell my clients is voice control is awesome, but don't rely on it because you want to know how to use your device. You want to know how to get around the apps. You want to know how to use the gestures. And, I do use voice control more of I guess just like kind of just something to play with. It's not my primary way of using my phone. I still am old school. I still use my gestures. I still use the on-screen keyboard. I don't really use dictation unless it's something I need to do quick. But it is, to me, you're right. I think iOS 13 is certainly maybe one of the most powerful updates that's jam-packed with a lot of stuff that, I think has gotten lost, so to speak, with the bugs. There's been so much talk about the bugs that it's almost like people are overlooking all of the great things that are included in iOS 13.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, for our listeners who don't know how it works, can you tell us a little bit about the customization of gestures? How does that work?
It's in the voiceover settings. You're going to do commands and then gestures, and then you have 1 finger, 2 finger, 3 finger, 4 finger gestures. And you can sort of add your own, if there's a certain thing that you do. So, for example, Scott Davert uses the example in the Apple Viz article about, let's say you use heading navigation a lot in web browsing. So instead of having to turn your rotor all the time and looking for headings, you can add a gesture. So, for example, what he used and I use is a 2-finger swipe to the right goes to the next heading. A 2-finger swipe to the left goes to the previous heading. Now, you cannot change existing gestures. In other words, the gestures that Apple includes as part of iOS and VoiceOver cannot be altered. So what it does is it leaves openings for the gestures that don't have anything assigned to them, at the moment. So, for example, the 2-finger swipe to the left and the 2-finger swipe to the right doesn't have, a gesture assigned to it. So you can add your own. I think it's a 4-finger double tap. A 2-finger quadruple tap, I think, is another one that doesn't have anything assigned to it. So you can add your own gesture. And it can be anything from, like I said, a rotor setting that you can add to it. Or you can even, like if you don't like the way a voiceover gesture exists as it is, you can always add a second, of your own custom command to make it easier on yourself. So, it's just something you really got to sort of get down and experience. And I, knowing the way the Mac works with this, I can tell you that probably, that Apple is only going to add to the customization capabilities as time goes on.
Oh, wow, how interesting. And now, voice controls. Can you explain a little bit for our listeners, how does that work?
You do have to turn it on. And again, it's a very powerful tool. I haven't really looked into all of the extensive uses of it, but it looks like you can even add vocabulary and stuff, but you can tell it's not Siri. So let me just make this differentiation because people get confused. Sure. This is like Siri on steroids. I mean, Siri is the assistant. You say something, Siri responds. This is just total voice control with you just tell it. It doesn't respond to you other than carrying out what you tell it to do. So you can do everything from, opening applications. You can have it double tap on items. You can have it do a long press. You can have it flick to the right. You can say, go right, go right, go right. If you want to work your way down a screen, there's all kinds of vocabulary commands that it will understand. So if you want to turn, now there is what they call go to sleep and wake up. Now, the reason why they have go to sleep and wake up is you got to remember, once voice control is active, it's always listening. And you have to be careful with that, because if you're doing other stuff and you're talking in the room, it's going to treat everything like a voice command. And I'll give you a quick example of how I learned the hard way. I'm in a car. I'm with my driver. We're coming back from a job, New York State Commission for the blind job. And I'm trying to text a client that I was supposed to meet with by telephone. And I'm trying to text a message and use the on-screen keyboard. I forgot that I had left voice control on because I had demonstrated it to a client earlier in the afternoon. So my driver is on the phone with her sister, and she's talking to her sister, and my phone is picking up all of her speech. So it's inserting her speech, what she's saying, into my text message to my client.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, so it was kind of a little embarrassing and stuff. I'm glad I caught it before I actually sent the text message out to him.
Yeah.
So the thing is, you got to make sure you either put it to sleep or turn it off. Now, the other thing that they need to fix, and I know Apple's aware of this and it will be addressed, is if you have voice control on and you put it to sleep, if you're on a phone call, like if I went to call you, I would hear VoiceOver repeatedly say, voice control is disabled during this call. Voice control is disabled during this call. Voice control is, so it just keeps repeating it. So what you have to do is either turn off the voice control or do a 3-finger double tap to mute VoiceOver speech until the phone call is over. But other than that, it's very impressive. And, again, remember that this is designed for people with physical impairments, like a paraplegic in a wheelchair.
Yes.
This is not designed for VoiceOver users. So don't, get this idea that, oh, Apple did this for us blind people. No, it's not for blind people. We can take advantage of it, but do not make it as your primary means of using your device, in my opinion.
Well, for our listeners, I have to agree with John. I mean, it's a great technology, but listeners know I like to be very honest always. I don't think we need to be independent, and that's wonderful to have voice control of devices. But also we have to know more than one way to do things, in my view, because then we are more capable of solving situations. For instance, what if you always rely on voice control and voice control has a bug and it doesn't work anymore? Then you freak out. Instead of having the tools to be able to deal with that. So,
and if you're in a noisy environment, it's going to be picking up everything else.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, I have to say that I listened to a demonstration, and you are able, when you are, for instance, on Safari as your web browser on the iPhone, you are able to say, read this, and it's going to read it for you. I didn't know that was another way of using that.
Yeah, I haven't played with that. Yeah, I got to actually, it's a good point. I've meant to actually look into that.
You can restart your device also by saying restart or something like that, because I heard it. I heard it, but I don't recall what was exactly the phrase. But for instance, something that I'm excited to see if will be able to be done is to copy and paste. And why I say this, John, is because I heard a demonstration with a sighted person, and he was able to select text, copy, open another app, and paste it. And that for me seems exciting, because sometimes I have a little bit of a trouble.
Yep.
copying.
No, absolutely.
So the possibilities are really going to expand a lot. Now, there is something that I have been wanting to ask someone like you, and it's about Siri Shortcuts and Siri itself. Now, we all know that Google Assistant is now more powerful than Siri. We know that. We understand that. And Apple understands that. And they say next year Siri is going to improve a lot. how do you see Siri in the future? And what about Siri Shortcuts? Is going somewhere or not?
Oh yeah, I think that's where they're leaning towards the future is with Siri Shortcuts. And Siri Shortcuts allows you to carry out tasks that would normally take multiple gestures or effort to carry out with one command. So you make a Siri shortcut that has a specific phrase to it that you say to Siri, and she'll do whatever it is, multiple tasks. I mean, something as simple as, I mean, I just, mess with it a little bit, but like, I do a sports radio show with a friend of mine a couple of times a month. And when we get sponsored, but we also pay part of the show out of our own pocket. And what I normally do is I PayPal my friend the money for my share of the show. So I have a Siri shortcut where all I got to do is say, pay Gary, and she will open the PayPal app, take the designated amount of money that I normally pay him, and send it. And that's all I have to do is say that, and she'll take care of it for me. So, and this is the type of stuff. And from reading a lot of stuff about Siri and the little things that Apple has done as far as certain little startup companies and things that they've bought that have to do with speech recognition, technology and stuff. I really think that they're kind of working towards something major, and with Siri, and the voice control aspect kind of hints at that. And I know it's a separate entity than Siri, but the fact that the voice control understands things so well leads me to believe that this is somehow going to tie into Siri, in some way. Maybe next year, as you heard. I don't know, but I just have a feeling that Apple is not going to rest. When Siri came out, they were way ahead of Google. They were way ahead of Microsoft Cortana. Amazon. They were way ahead of them, and they allowed all these companies not just catch them, but as you said, I think Google Assistant, I think Alexa, I think all of that stuff is past Apple in a lot of ways.
Right.
So, and that's something Apple's got to address. They can't just sit back and say, oh, okay, well, you can still do this, this, and this. No, that's not. This is the future. So they really do have to, in my opinion, improve Siri.
Now, is it easy to create a shortcut, John?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to take the suggestions and kind of follow the examples. Like there are some stuff, like I basically went online and I did like research and looked at some Google searches for creating Siri shortcuts and stuff, because I wasn't getting, like, I don't really understand the shortcut app. I kind of do, but I don't. And I really got frustrated trying to use it. So I kind of fell back on just going online and looking up stuff. And that's how I created the PayPal thing, was basically just taking, an idea that I saw online and using it. And I was like, I wonder if this is actually going to work. And it actually does. So it was pretty cool.
Now, there is a feature on the iPads, and I think the iPad has grown a lot with their features, and it's so much more powerful than it used to be in my view. I don't have an iPad, but I think it's worth it to get one. I do believe so. My question for you is, when will we have a split screen on the iPhone, being that the screen is so much bigger now?
I don't know. That's a good question. I know you can do that on the iPads. I know that's done. But I don't know, if Apple's gonna, it seems to me, and again, this is opinion. This is not, I don't know for sure. I could be proven wrong with the next iOS version, but I think there's now an effort to differentiate between iPad OS and regular iOS, and that leads me to believe that they're going to try to keep the two operating systems kind of separate. So you'll see the split screen, I think, on the iPads, but I don't know if that's going to come to the iPhone.
That's a good point. Now, any comments on the Mac? How's the Mac going?
I've been beta testing Catalina all summer, so I've kind of seen it progress through its stages. Again, just like with iOS 13, there are some minor bugs in there. There are some, little annoyances depending on what your usage is, what you do with it. But again, as I said, read the Apple Viz, the updated list of known bugs, and make an educated decision. I am really enjoying Catalina. I just, I've been using it fine. It's been my everyday OS for the last month. I made the full-time jump from beta testing to making it my work machine, installing Catalina and using it every day. So I'm fine with it. But again, I don't want to tell people what to do or what not to do. And I'd rather see folks look this stuff up and make an educated decision on their own based on what they read, whether they think, okay, is this going to be an issue for me? Is this going to annoy me too much? Or I can live with it. I'll just go with the bug fixes as they come along. So, that's really up to the end user, but I really am enjoying Catalina.
John, I have a question related to the Mac, and is, do you see the big improvement in how you use your device? In this case, the computer using Siri on the Mac.
I'm not a big Siri Mac user. I really use it a lot more on the phone and my HomePod. I don't really find a need to use it that often on my Mac. I guess just call it, I guess I'm just old school and I never think about it. I've just used computers the way I use computers for so long that having Siri on the Mac, the only time it's in my conscious awareness is when I'm teaching this stuff to people and it comes up, as part of our discussion. If I have a client who feels that they want to take advantage of Siri on the Mac, then I'll start to mess with it a little bit and play with it and kind of, oh, okay, I forgot it's here. But in all honesty, I'm not a big Siri person when it comes to the Mac.
Okay, now we have two devices more to talk about. One is the iPad. Anything new that you like?
Well, I haven't gotten to use the iPad OS on my iPad because I have a first generation Air, but I have a client in New Mexico who's been using a brand new iPad Pro, and he's loving it. And the one thing that really interests me, and I think you can do this on the iPhones to a certain degree, but connecting external drives, thumb drives and USB powered drives, you were able to access the information on from the iPad. And and as I said, I think as time passes now, you're really going to see the iPad OS really start to diverge from the regular iOS. So what we're seeing right now is more of like the infancy of iPad OS, as and I think you're going to see more and more as time passes, but I haven't personally gotten a chance to play with it.
Thank you for mentioning this part, because I had that on my mind since 2 days ago, and is this for our listeners. They are saying that on iOS 13 we are able to plug in, obviously using an adapter or something. We are able to plug in any USB flash drive on the iPhone. Did you know?
Yeah. I think there is a limitation compared to the iPad, and I forget what the limitation is. I don't know if it's that the iPhone will only do like external power drives. It can't do unpowered, like in other words, a thumb drive, or if it's the opposite, that it will do thumb drives, but it won't do like power drives. I honestly forgot what I read, and it's one of those things that's been in the back of my mind that I have my iPhone sitting right here, and I can test it. I have thumb drives up the wazoo here, and I have a couple of external drives, and I should really just give it a shot and see what happens.
I do believe you are right, and we are not able yet to plug in external hard drives or any kind of external drives, but it's about the USB flash drive that we are able to do.
Yeah,
But
I think
we
it's the
have
flash drives we can. Yeah, it's something like that. I don't remember what the what it can't do part.
what kind of adapter we need for that, John?
I think it comes down to your iPhone model. Whether it's a USB-C adapter or a Lightning adapter.
Okay, good to know. Now, I have heard so many good things about the Apple Watch. I want your opinion on that and why it's interesting for us blind people.
Well, I've had the watch since Series 1 when it first
Oh,
came out, and I wasn't so, I'll be honest with you, back when it was out, I wasn't sold on it because I've been a Braille watch user for so many years, and I was like, what do I need a watch like that for? And really, the guy in the Apple store locally here sold me on it. And it just so happened that this guy knew how to demonstrate. He was a sighted guy, and he knew how to demonstrate the accessibility stuff and voiceover on the watch. And he really got me leaning to buy one. So I ended up taking the plunge. And I love the watch because it gives me the ability to do a lot of stuff without having to take my phone out. And, you can do everything from dictation. You get notifications that come in. You don't have to grab the phone. I can check the time discreetly, just by double tapping on the screen, when it's locked. And you can get the time vibrated, the haptic feedback of the time. So there's just a lot of great things. I use it with exercising. I use it to keep track of calories and steps and, all of that stuff. Obviously there are apps that are streamlined to work with the watch. So from a blind person's perspective, it's just like a sighted person. It really comes down to what you do. And, like people have asked me, do I need to get a watch? And my response is, do you need to get one? No, that's up to you. Is it going to benefit you? If you feel that it's got features and functionality that's going to benefit you, yeah, then get it. But if you don't feel that you really need to have one, then don't go out and buy one. I know blind people are perfectly content with their Braille watch or their talking watch, and they don't need a smart watch. And that's fine. That's up to, up to the individual. I find a lot of use for mine, and I find that my phone stays in my pocket a lot because I can do everything just by tapping on the watch and getting all my information. And, I can make calls. It's like, Dick Tracy or Get Smart or whatever, you can make phone calls and the watch becomes like a speakerphone. And it will also, connect to the AirPods. So if you wanted privacy, if you didn't want the watch having, speaking, or, while somebody's on the phone with you, you can always, connect your AirPods.
wow, that's very nice. and John, finally, I would like to know your opinion on two things. One is haptic. You discussed this before, haptic. It was 3D touch, now it's haptic. And I want to know your opinion on this augmented reality thing that Apple is talking about so much. Those two things, how do they work for us?
Well, haptic is great in that it's vibration patterns and vibrations in general that give you feedback. So, you might be in a noisy environment. May not be able to hear the voiceover sounds or, stuff like that. So you can use the different types of vibrations that the phone will make or that the watch will make to let you know. And this has actually existed for a long time before it even started to get, I guess, in fashion. You had the ability to do custom vibration patterns. Like, you can have custom ringtones, you can have custom text tones for individual callers, but you also
Right.
can have haptic feedback. So for example, when my brother calls me, if I have my phone muted, it vibrates the, shaving a haircut 5 bits, pattern. When my girlfriend calls me, it's the SOS, Morse code SOS vibration pattern. So you can use those types of vibrations. And the cool thing when it comes to customization is you can invent your own vibration patterns. just by tapping on the screen. But, for regular feedback, I think that people sometimes kind of miss the point. And they, well, what do we need that for? That's stupid. That's dumb. Why the phone's always... Well, if you learn to pay attention to what those vibrations are indicating, it tells you just as much as audio feedback. And, and that's the thing I don't think a lot of people are really quite getting about the haptic feedback yet. That, it can tell you just as much as a sentence spoken to you.
And John, you told me that on the watch is going to tell you the time with vibration. How's that working?
It will vibrate like longer vibrations to let you know the hour. I'm sorry, it'll do like, depending on what time it is, like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think all the way up to 10 is like quick little, like rapid vibration. So let's say, for example, it's 8:57 here right now. So if I did the vibration feedback, it would do 8 quick little tones, little vibrations to tell me it's 8 o'clock. Then it will do 5 longer vibrations to tell me the tens of the minutes, and it will do another series of 7 little vibrations to tell me, the actual minutes. So it'll break it down into 8, and then 5 times with the long press to tell you 50, and then the shorter ones for the 7. So once you get used to the way it works, it's actually pretty discreet because, even with a Braille watch, people could see you flipping the thing open and checking the time, and they know what you're doing. So if you're sitting in a meeting and you don't want people to know, like a sighted person can discreetly just, turn their wrist and look quickly, and they can see what time it is without making it obvious, So for me, I can put my wrist under a table, double tap the watch, and just feel the vibration, and nobody knows I'm checking the time. And that to me is great because at least you're not making a visual spectacle of like, oh, he's bored, he's checking his watch again,
Yeah, that sounds very interesting and useful, actually.
Yeah, it's what I use it all the time. It's just, I love that. You can tap the watch once and it will speak the time. And then you have what's called auto enabled, like so auto speak enabled. So like when I do the time, I don't know if it's gonna. So I have it set up so that it will tell me the time, but it also tells me what my battery level is. So you can enable auto speak for any of the complications or the things that are on your watch. As far as, let's say, if you have like calendar, what's your next calendar event? Or what the current temperature is right now. So you can have auto speak for different things that you want included with the time, which I think is really cool. Because like I love to know my battery level because, when my battery level starts to get lower, I got to be aware of that.
Yeah. And also is great the sound quality of the watch, right?
Yeah, I have the volume turned down because I'm on a call with you, but normally I have it a little bit higher than what it is now.
But I was able to listen to it, so that's a powerful sound.
Yeah, and that's low. It's not really high. I turned it down before I got on the call with you.
Right. And about augmented reality, people say it's going to help us.
I am not really... I can see where people think, it depends on what... Let me put it to you. Let me take a step back and say it this way. I think augmentative reality for us, if done properly, could be extraordinarily helpful to us. I think it's one of these things where it can really help us traveling, get an idea of what our surroundings are, things like that. The question is going to be, is any of these companies really going to, gear this for a blind person? Like right now, augmentative reality is used for example, in games where you get submerged into, let's say you're playing Star Wars and you're fighting off stormtroopers and stuff, and you really feel like you're in that world. But from a blind person's perspective, how augmentative reality is going to be used specifically for us, I hope Apple is going down that road. I hope there is a development team that's addressing that. But I can see the potential. But am I holding out my hopes that like next year they're saying Apple's going to have a new augmentative reality version 2 or 3 or whatever it is? Is it going to benefit us? I don't know. I don't know. I think it could. Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of potential in what augmentative reality can do for us. It's just seeing who's gonna seize the mantle and and actually address it and make it work for us. That's the question. Is it going to be Apple or is it going to be a third party vendor?
Now, John, my final question, because I do agree with you. We'll see. We'll see. There's so many
Right.
things coming our way. That's the only thing I can say for listeners. My last question is: can you tell us a little bit about Mac for the Blind?
Mac for the Blind, as you said earlier, is my company. My main thing that I do is I'm a trainer, an Apple trainer. I do Windows training. I do some other stuff, but my main thing is Apple training. I do products, Mac, voiceover on the Mac, voiceover on the iPhone, iPad, etc. I do it, by telephone. I do in person for local clients, but for those people overseas or in other parts of the United States, I do it by Skype. I do it by telephone. I do it by FaceTime. As long as I can hear you using your device, I can, assist you in learning how to use the voiceover, features. I sell audio tutorials. There are some free ones on the website, but I also sell audio tutorials, which are basically encapsulated lessons. In other words, what I would teach the client is what you'd be purchasing in the audio tutorial. I have a series for the Mac. I have a series for the iPhone. I got to update a few of them now that iOS 13 and Catalina are out for the Mac, but otherwise, they're available. And I also do assistive technology consulting. I'm trying to become officially recognized by Apple as a trainer. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, that will be a reality. So, I basically am involved in Apple. I mean, that's really what Mac for the Blind is. It wasn't where I intended to be 10 years ago. I didn't think I would be a trainer. If anybody would have told me 10 years ago, you know what you're going to be doing full time in your life? You're going to be teaching people. I would have laughed at them because that would have been the last thing that I would have expected me to be doing after I sold products for 18 years. I was a salesman, quote unquote. So now I'm teaching people and I'm loving it a lot more. It's a lot less stress. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I've worked with people all over the United States. I've worked with people in Singapore, all over the UK, all over Europe. I've worked with people in Japan,
Wow.
all over the world, basically in Central America, South America. So, if you are interested in any kind of training, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to give you a hand.
What's your email address?
The email, that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me is basically it's just John, JOHN, at macfortheblind.com, MacFortheblind.com. You can go to the website, www.macfortheblind.com, and there is a contact link in there in case you can't remember what the email address is.
Perfect, John. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful talk with our listeners.
Well, thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and for everybody listening, remember you can email me at lowvisionbureau@gmail.com. My name is Alvaro, saying that this interview is going to be posted in November or so. We are recording this interview now in October, but we have so many shows piled up, so probably in the middle of November we'll have it on. Thank you so much for listening. This is Alvaro from LVB SHOW saying good night.